You're listening to Midnight Horror Whispers, the show where true stories from the edge of reality find their way into your ears. Wherever you are tonight, curled up in bed, driving down a quiet road, or sitting alone with the lights low, I want you to relax, take a deep breath, and let yourself sink into the story. Tonight, we have a chilling tale from rural America. A story that feels so real, you might find yourself checking your own windows after it's done. So, dim the lights, get comfortable, and prepare for the account of one man's encounter with something that shouldn't exist. And now, our guest speaks for the first time. He's here to tell us, in his own words, what happened to him. Wherever you're listening from, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy these true tales. And now, I'll let him take over.
My name's Daniel. I grew up in a small town in northern Kentucky, not far from the Ohio border. I wasn't much for ghost stories, never believed in them, really. But the summer after I turned 27, I moved into an old farmhouse my grandfather left me, sitting alone at the end of a dirt road that the locals just called the Hollow. It was late August when I first arrived. The sun was setting behind the ridges, and the air smelled of hay and wet earth. The house looked like it hadn't been lived in for decades. Paint peeling, windows dusty, shutters hanging off their hinges. I thought it was perfect, quiet, secluded, my kind of place. The first night, I unpacked, made a small fire in the old stone fireplace, and tried to convince myself that the creaks and groans of the old house were just what's settling. But even as I told myself that, I couldn't shake a feeling, like I wasn't supposed to be alone in that place. It started with small things. The floorboards in the hallway would squeak even when I hadn't stepped near them. I'd be in the kitchen, and the pantry door would swing open on its own, just a crack, as if someone had brushed past. I tried to ignore it. I kept telling myself that wind, or maybe an animal, was responsible. Then I found the first note. It was tucked behind a loose brick in the fireplace. A scrap of yellowed paper with words written in messy, slanted handwriting. Leave before night. I thought it was a prank, or maybe left by my grandfather decades ago as a joke. I laughed, crumpled it up, and threw it in the fire. But the unease wouldn't leave me. That night I heard it, the footsteps, slow, heavy, walking from the hallway to the kitchen, then stopping right behind me. I froze. My heart was pounding. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to know. The next morning, the note was back. Same words, same handwriting, now pressed on the kitchen table. Leave before night. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound was amplified. The wind through the broken shutters sounded like whispering voices. Somewhere upstairs, I thought I heard someone walking across the floorboards, even though the attic had been locked since I got there. Days passed, and the incidents grew stranger. Mirrors would fog up, even when the house was cool. I would wake in the middle of the night to the feeling of someone standing at the foot of my bed. Always there, watching, silent. One evening, I went to the barn at the edge of the property. It had been empty for years, and I wanted to clean it up. As I opened the rusted door, I felt a cold wave rush past me, like someone had pushed through the air. Inside, the barn was empty, or so I thought. In the far corner, I saw a figure, a shadow of a man, hunched over like he was kneeling. I called out. No response. When I took a step closer, the shadow disappeared. After that, things escalated quickly. The knocking started. At first, it was occasional on the walls, on the floor, in the ceiling. Then it became constant. Every night, without fail, it would start just after midnight. A rhythm, like a heartbeat, pounding through the house. And then the whispering. Names, my name, softly at first, then louder, more insistent. I tried to leave, packed my things. But the moment I hit the dirt road to the main highway, something stopped me. The air grew thick, like the fog in the valley had suddenly dropped, and I could see the farmhouse from the road. But the lights were on. There weren't supposed to be lights on. The place had no electricity connected. Yet through the windows I saw shadows moving. Not me moving, not the wind. Shadows of people, of figures, watching, waiting. I've told myself since then that maybe I imagined it. Maybe the isolation, the heat, The stress of moving into an old house did something to my mind. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And I know, even now, that the hollow doesn't want anyone there. I sleep with the lights on now. I've never returned to that farmhouse since I left. But some nights, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I hear footsteps again. Outside my window. Slow. Heavy. Waiting. The days after that first night were a blur of unease and exhaustion. I tried to get back to a routine, fixing the roof, clearing weeds from the yard, even painting the peeling shutters. But no matter what I did, the house had its own rhythm, its own will. It was the third night that things went beyond just shadows and whispers. I was lying in bed, the ceiling fan creaking, when I felt it again, that presence at the foot of my bed. But this time I could see it. Not clearly, but enough. A figure, darker than the room, standing silently, watching me. My heart froze. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come. My body felt heavy, as though the air itself had turned to lead. I blinked, and it was gone. But the weight didn't leave. I could feel it all around me, pressing in like the walls were closing. I got up, shakily, and went to the window. The valley outside was quiet, empty, peaceful, except for one thing. In the distance, near the edge of the forest, there was movement. Figures, slowly emerging from the tree line. Not running, not walking, gliding, almost. I told myself it was a trick of the moonlight, shadows of trees and branches. I wanted to believe that, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they knew I was watching, that they were waiting. The next morning, I found the second note. Same messy handwriting, same yellowed paper. But this one had changed. It said, "You can't leave." That hit me harder than anything before. I'd felt it before, that fear in my chest, but reading those words made it tangible. The house wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and it didn't want me to go. I began to notice things in the daytime too. Small things like objects moving when I wasn't looking. A chair shifted an inch, a plate overturned in the sink. But more disturbing were the sounds. Footsteps in the hallways during the afternoon, soft at first, then growing louder as if something was pacing, circling me. Sometimes I would hear laughter, low, guttural, almost human but not quite. One night, desperate for sleep, I tried to convince myself that facing it would make it stop. I sat in the living room, flashlight in hand, and called out, "Who's there?" Silence. Then, a whisper so close it felt like it was inside my skull. "Don't leave. Stay forever." I ran upstairs and locked myself in the bedroom. But it didn't matter. That night I saw the walls move. Not slowly, but rippling, like the house itself was breathing. Shapes formed in the shadows. Faces, twisted and screaming silently. Couldn't look away, couldn't move. I was trapped in that living nightmare, paralyzed by fear and fascination at the same time. Days blended into nights. I lost track of how long I'd been there. Food sat uneaten. The mail piled up. When I forced myself to step outside, the air felt heavier, thicker. The valley, the trees, the field beyond the barn. All of it felt wrong, like I'd stepped into a place that wasn't meant for the living. It was during one of those desperate daylight walks that I found the old well behind the barn. The stones were covered in moss, and the water inside was black and still. I don't know why I felt compelled to look, but I leaned over the edge. For a moment, I thought I saw faces in the water. Pale, desperate faces, pressing against the surface from below. I stumbled back, heart racing, and the air turned icy cold. The whispering followed me back to the house. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every creak, every shadow, every whisper felt like it was coming from inside me. I tried talking to myself, rationalizing, but it was useless. And then I heard it. A voice, clear and unmistakable, whispering my name from the basement. I don't know why I went down there. Curiosity, courage, or the sheer terror of not knowing. The basement door was cold to the touch. The air inside smelled of damp earth and decay. As I descended the steps, I felt fingers brush my shoulder. Not human fingers. Long, thin, icy. I spun around, nothing. And then I saw it. At the far corner, where the shadows pooled thickest, a figure crouched. Its head tilted unnaturally, and its eyes, if you could call them that, reflected the faint light from the single bulb overhead. It didn't move. It just watched me, and for the first time I understood. This wasn't random haunting. This was intentional. It was waiting. I ran back upstairs, heart hammering, and locked every door I could find. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. The house was alive, breathing, watching. And every night it became more daring, more bold. I began to realize that staying was a trap. But leaving wasn't an option either. Something didn't want me to leave. And I was learning too late that the house had a way of making that clear. I thought I'd seen everything the house had to offer by then, but I was wrong. By the fourth week, the presence didn't just linger in the shadows. It invaded everything I did. It started with the animals. My old dog, Rusty, who had been my companion for years, refused to come near the house. He would stand at the edge of the yard, growling at nothing, hackles raised, eyes fixed on the house as if he could see them too. One morning, I found him whimpering, nose pressed to the back door, staring at the basement window. I never went down there again. Then came the voices, not whispers this time, but speaking. Clear sentences, forming words in a language I didn't understand. The kind of language that makes your stomach twist and your skin crawl. I would wake in the middle of the night to conversations, like dozens of people just beyond the walls, speaking all at once, overlapping, incomprehensible. And every so often, I'd catch one word I understood. My name. Always my name. Objects began moving in ways that defied explanation. Plates slid off counters as if pushed. Chairs tipped over. Doors slammed shut with such force the entire house shook. I tried recording it on my phone, trying to convince myself it was just some trick I was imagining. But the recordings were always silent. Nothing. Just static, like the house itself swallowed the evidence. One night, I decided to leave. I packed my things, called a cab, and even started my car. The engine wouldn't start. The radio, which hadn't worked in years, came alive suddenly, blaring static, then faint, distorted laughter. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel, trying to make it stop. And then I heard it, footsteps behind me. Not on the road, not outside. Inside the car. Heavy, deliberate, pacing. I didn't look back. I knew what I'd see. I finally managed to get the engine running and drove as fast as I could down the hollow road. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I swear I saw it. The figure from the basement, standing in the middle of the road, watching me go. And then it vanished. Back at the house the next day, or what I thought was the next day, I found the notes again. More of them, taped to the walls, scattered across the kitchen table, tucked inside drawers. But these weren't warnings anymore. They were demands. You belong here. Don't try to leave. Forever. And it wasn't just the house anymore. I started seeing them outside. At night, when I tried to leave for groceries or even a walk, shadows appeared at the edge of the fields, just standing there, watching, always watching. Their forms weren't solid, more like smoke shaped into figures, but when I looked away, I could feel their gaze on me. Sleep became impossible. I would wake to feeling hands on my face, cold, clawing, pressing me down. Shadows crawling along the walls, whispering my name. Sometimes, when I turned on the lights, I would catch glimpses of them in the corners of my eyes. Pale faces with hollow eyes, mouths moving in silent screams. One evening, I sat on the porch, trying to keep my sanity. The sun had set, the air was thick and still, and then I heard it, a child laughing. Sweet, high-pitched, innocent, but coming from the barn. The barn had been empty for decades. Rusty barked and bolted from the porch, refusing to return. I grabbed a flashlight and forced myself toward the barn. Inside, the air was frigid. My breath came in clouds. And there, at the far end, was a little girl. Pale, eyes dark and hollow, staring at me. She raised a finger, pointed directly at me, and whispered, "Stay." I ran back to the house and locked every door, every window. I stayed up all night, flashlight in hand, praying it would be gone in the morning. But when dawn came, The house was quiet only on the surface. Shadows still lingered in the corners. Faces pressed against the windows, mouths moving silently. That's when I realized this wasn't just a haunting. The house didn't want me out of curiosity. It wanted me trapped, and it would do anything to keep me there. Anything. I stopped counting the nights. Sleep didn't matter anymore. Daylight didn't either. The house had swallowed both. By the 5th week, time began to feel broken. Clock stopped. My phone battery would drain within minutes, no matter how long I charged it. Some mornings I'd wake and the sun would already be gone. As if I'd slept through an entire day I couldn't remember. The house had changed, too. The walls looked darker, as if stained by something seeping through from the other side. The smell of damp earth and rot never left. And the sounds, those were the worst. You'd think it would be the screams or whispers, but no. It was the breathing. I could hear the house breathing, every night. Long, deep, human breaths coming from the walls themselves. I started marking days on the kitchen wall to keep my sanity. But one morning, all the marks were gone. In their place was one message, carved into the plaster: "Stay home." Rusty was gone by then. I found the back door open, his collar lying on the porch. There was blood on the steps. I never saw him again. Something in me broke that night. I decided I'd rather die trying to leave than rot in that house another day. I packed what I could and waited for dawn. But when I opened the front door, dawn never came. It was night outside, black, endless night. The sky was wrong, full of stars I didn't recognize. The air was thick, heavy, almost solid. I stepped outside and realized I wasn't standing on my porch anymore. The field was gone. The trees were gone. The world was gone. All that existed was the house behind me, glowing faintly in the dark, and an ocean of nothing stretching out forever. I turned to go back inside, but the door had closed. I pounded on it, screaming, begging. The wood felt alive under my fists, pulsing with every hit. Then I heard it whisper, right next to my ear, "You were home." When I woke, I was back in bed. Morning sunlight through the window, birds chirping outside. For a second, I thought it was all a nightmare. But when I looked down, my hands were covered in dust and splinters. My knuckles were bruised. I'd really been outside wherever outside was. The notes had returned, hundreds of them now, pinned to the walls, the ceiling, the furniture, each one written in the same hand. Some said my name over and over. Some said things I didn't understand. But one message appeared more than any other. Under the floor. I don't know why I listened. Maybe I was too tired to fight. Maybe curiosity finally replaced fear. But I tore up the old floorboards in the living room, one by one. Underneath, I found dirt, fresh, disturbed soil, and something buried just beneath it. It was a box, small, wooden, wrapped in cloth that smelled like mold and iron. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, of people I'd never met. Men, women, children, all standing in front of the farmhouse, smiling faintly, eyes dull and empty. And at the back of the box was a final picture. It was me, standing at the porch, smiling that same empty smile. I dropped the box, stumbled back, and that's when I saw them again. Dozens of figures standing outside the windows, surrounding the house. Every one of them pale, still watching. The little girl was there too, and this time she wasn't alone. They started moving closer, pressing their faces against the glass, their mouths moving in perfect silence. I could see their lips forming one word, over and over, "Stay." The walls began to shake. The house groaned. The air filled with dust and whispers. The photographs from the box scattered across the floor, sliding toward the fireplace like pulled by invisible hands. I watched, frozen, as they burned without flame, curling, blackening, disappearing into the air. And then everything stopped. Silence. Stillness. Not even my own breath dared to make a sound. That's when I heard it, the faintest sound, coming from below the floor again. A heartbeat. Slow. Heavy. Like the house itself was alive, waiting for me to make my next move. I couldn't sleep that night. Every shadow, every creak, every whisper felt magnified. as if the house itself was breathing over me. But I couldn't ignore what I discovered under the floor. The heartbeat. It was calling me, drawing me back. The next evening, I forced myself to return to the living room. The floorboards were still removed, the hole yawning like a dark mouth. The air that rose from it smelled of wet earth and decay. My flashlight trembled in my hand. I knew I had to look. I climbed down into the crawl space. The dirt floor was cold and damp. My fingers dug into the soil as I moved forward, and that's when I saw it. A stone slab slightly raised above the ground. It wasn't part of the foundation, it had been placed there deliberately. Carved into the stone were symbols, strange and jagged, nothing I recognized. The heartbeat grew louder. I swear it wasn't mine anymore. I tried to back away, but the floor beneath me shifted. Not like the wood settling, but alive. Something was moving beneath the dirt. I heard scraping, clawing like nails on bone. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. The slab lifted, or maybe it moved itself. And there, inside a hollow beneath, I saw them. The bodies. Not fresh, not decayed, frozen, preserved in some unholy way. Hundreds of them, stacked carefully, faces still intact, eyes wide open. And then I realized something that made my blood run cold. I recognized some of them. People from the town. People who had gone missing over the decades. And in the very center, lying on a bed of dirt, was me, or what looked like me. Face twisted, eyes empty. I wanted to vomit, to run, to tear my own eyes out, but I couldn't move. I was frozen by the sight. The heartbeat was louder now, inside my skull. Then I felt it, hands. Thin, cold, reaching up from the box, grabbing my ankles, my legs, pulling me down. I fought, clawing at the dirt, trying to pull myself back into the crawl space. The walls seemed to shift, closing in. The hands dragged me closer to the bodies, closer to the slab, and the whispers began. Thousands of voices, chanting in that language I didn't understand, repeating one phrase over and over, "Join us." Somewhere deep in my mind, I remembered my grandfather's warning, something he had muttered once as a joke, or so I thought, about the hollow and the farmhouse. Something about it feeding, something about it never letting anyone go. I kicked and twisted, finally breaking free, crawling out of the crawl space, falling onto the living room floor. My flashlight skittered across the room, and then I saw it, the walls, covered in shadows, not human-shaped, more like liquid darkness, moving, swirling, reaching for me. I grabbed my coat, my keys, anything I could take, and ran to the door. But when I opened it, there was nothing. No yard, no dirt road, no morning sunlight, just blackness. And the figures, the pale, hollow-eyed figures, all around me silently pressing in. The little girl at the center pointing, smiling. I screamed. And then, just like that, I was back in bed. Morning sunlight pouring through the windows. Rusty nowhere to be seen. My heart was racing so hard it hurt. I thought it was over. I thought I had dreamed it all. But when I looked at the living room floor, I saw it. A single note, scribbled on yellowed paper. Welcome home. I knew then, in a way I can never explain, that I had not left. That I would never leave. And the house, it had chosen me. Chosen me to join them. To be preserved, waiting. For the next unsuspecting soul to arrive. After that night, I stopped trying to leave. Couldn't. Every attempt, every plan, ended the same way. I woke back in my bed, the sun streaming in like nothing had happened, and the house waiting, patient, omnipresent. I began to notice things I hadn't before. The mirrors in the house. They weren't reflecting me. They reflected the house, yes, but not me. Sometimes, when I looked long enough, I would catch glimpses of the figures behind me in the glass, watching, always watching, their hollow eyes boring into my back. The sounds became unbearable. The whispers escalated into chanting. Footsteps paced the floor above me, circling, never stopping. And then the scratching began. Nails on wood, walls, floorboards, as if the house itself were trying to tear its way open from inside. I tried to communicate with them, in the only way I could think. I spoke aloud, begged for mercy, pleaded to leave. And one night, I heard a response. A voice, deep, low, echoing, from the walls themselves. You belong. The air turned thick, hot, and heavy, and the shadows started to move on their own. They swirled around me, forming shapes, distorted, impossible angles, faces I recognized and faces I did not. The little girl appeared again, floating above the floor, pointing at me, smiling that same empty smile. Then the room shifted. The walls stretched, warped, turning into a corridor that seemed to go on forever. I ran, even though I didn't know where I was going. I screamed, but no sound came. The floor pulsed beneath my feet, rising and falling like the beating of a great heart. I could feel it in my chest, in my skull, as if the house had become a part of me. Somewhere along the way, I saw the photographs again. They floated in the air, spinning slowly, showing images of everyone who had entered the house before me. People I recognized from town, strangers, faces smiling, faces twisted in terror. And in the very center, my own photograph appeared, slowly decaying, eyes darkening. I don't know how long I ran through that endless corridor. Time lost all meaning. Every step I took was mirrored by shadows, by whispers, by cold, crawling hands. The house was alive, aware, feeding on my fear. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear a laugh, low, guttural, as if it had been waiting decades for me to arrive. By the end of that night, I realized something I hadn't dared to admit. The house didn't just want me there. It wanted me to see, to understand. It wanted me to join. And no matter what I did, no matter how I ran, how I screamed, how I begged, I couldn't escape. I've tried to rationalize it since. Isolation, stress, sleep deprivation. Maybe I'm losing my mind. But I know the truth. And if you ever come across that farmhouse at the end of the hollow, don't go in. Don't look at the windows. Don't stay. Because once you do, it's already too late. By the time the 7th week came, I stopped keeping track of days entirely. I didn't eat much. I didn't drink much. The house had me, body and soul. Every step I took, every breath I drew, felt like it belonged to the walls themselves. It started with the shadows becoming solid. Not just forms, not just glimpses in corners, but full figures, moving through the house as if they had weight. They walked the halls, stared through the windows, leaned over furniture. And they weren't silent anymore. They whispered my name, called me to join them, laughed in that hollow way that made my bones ache. The little girl appeared again, only she wasn't alone. There were others with her now, pale, hollow-eyed children, standing silently in the corners, their eyes following me, their smiles empty and cruel. One of them stepped forward, and I realized it wasn't a child at all, just a figure made to look like one, stretched and twisted, impossibly thin, long limbs bending where they shouldn't. And then I heard it, the heartbeat, not the quiet one from before, but loud, deafening, like the house had become a living thing with one massive, monstrous heart. The floor beneath me throbbed in time with it. I fell to my knees, pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't stop. I could feel it in my chest, in my skull, in my very bones. I tried to run, but the walls shifted again, turning the rooms into endless corridors. The doors I tried to open led nowhere, only deeper into the maze. And the shadows followed, circling, moving, always just beyond the reach of the flashlight I held in trembling hands. That's when I saw them, the faces, hundreds, maybe thousands, pressed into the walls themselves. Not painted, not drawn, living faces. Silent, expressionless, eyes staring through me, mouths moving in slow, dreadful motions. They were the people who had come before me, and I knew with absolute certainty that I was next. I screamed until I couldn't scream anymore. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. And then I felt it, the hands again, cold, rigid, clawing at me, dragging me toward the center of the house. I fought, twisted, kicked, but I couldn't break free. The shadows, the walls, the very floor were alive, holding me, shaping me, pulling me down. And the little girl, she floated above me now, pointing, smiling, her eyes empty pits of nothing. Around her, the other figures closed in, circling, whispering, chanting, reaching, pulling, dragging. And I realized, in a moment of horrifying clarity, that I wasn't just trapped. I was becoming part of the house. The heartbeat swallowed me. The whispers consumed me. And as the shadows pressed closer, I knew I would never leave. Not really. The house had claimed me. And I understood, finally, the truth my grandfather had hinted at. The hollow doesn't just haunt. It feeds. And it waits for those foolish enough to step inside its walls. I don't remember how long it's been. Days, weeks, maybe years, I can't tell anymore. Time doesn't exist in the hollow. The house has no regard for it. It only exists to feed, to trap, to consume. I am still here, not fully myself. The shadows and the walls, the whispers and the heartbeat, they've made me part of the house. I can feel it in my chest, in my limbs, in my thoughts. Sometimes, I catch glimpses of my old body lying in the photographs, the empty-eyed version, waiting silently beneath the floorboards. And sometimes, I see new faces, strangers, foolish people who came too close, peering through the windows, and the house smiles for them, silently, hungrily. I've tried to warn people. I've tried to tell them not to come, not to step onto the hollow's dirt road. But the words never leave me. They're trapped here too, like me, just echoes carried on the wind that seeps through the cracks and broken windows. If you ever find yourself near an old, isolated farmhouse at the end of a dirt road in the hollow, don't stop. Don't even glance at it. Don't let curiosity or disbelief lure you in. Once you step inside, the walls will watch, the shadows will wait, and the heartbeat will call. And no matter how fast you run, no matter how loud you scream, no matter what you do, it will not let you go. I am Daniel, and I am still here.
Welcome to Midnight Radio Horror. Tonight, we bring you the story of Aaron, a man whose ordinary life took a terrifying turn. A story that will follow him from his childhood all the way into the shadows that haunt him now. Sit back, relax, let the rain sounds soothe you, and let the black screen guide your imagination. Here's Aaron.
My name is Aaron, and I grew up in a small, almost forgotten town in rural Kentucky called Leachfield. Population barely a few thousand. A town where everyone knows your name, your business, and your past before you even realize it. I was the youngest of 3 kids, and my childhood was simple, sometimes painfully ordinary. But ordinary has a way of hiding the things you never expect, the things that can crawl into your life unnoticed, until one day they're all you can see. My father, Ray, was a quiet man, stern in his own way but kind. He drove trucks for a living, often gone for days, sometimes weeks, hauling goods across the country. He'd come back with stories about roadside diners, storms that made bridges sway, and strangers who smelled of something otherworldly. I loved those stories. They made the world bigger than the small farmhouse we lived in. My mother, Linda, stayed home with us kids. She was the warmth of our house, the smell of fresh bread baking, the hum of a lullaby that never seemed to leave her lips. She worried about everything, especially me. I was restless, always wandering, always poking my nose where it didn't belong. Maybe that's why some of the things that happened to me later hit me so hard. I had always been curious, always looking too far, too deep. Dad had one obsession, his radio. Not a TV, not a computer, not even the truck's CD. An old shortwave radio that sat on a shelf in the garage. He said it kept him company, that the voices from faraway stations made the nights less lonely. I didn't understand it as a kid. It was just a box with a speaker and dials, dusty, humming with static. But to him, it was alive. He died when I was 12. Heart attack. No warning. Just gone. I remember standing at the funeral, my chest tight, staring at his casket, and thinking I could still hear him humming from the garage. Mom cried. My siblings tried to console me. Couldn't breathe. After Dad passed, the house felt empty. I remember walking into the garage one night, the radio sitting there as it always had, but now silent, still lifeless. I didn't touch it. Couldn't. It felt wrong, like it belonged to him and him alone. Life went on. I went to school, graduated, left for college. Life was busy enough to ignore the hollow spaces in my memories. But I always came back home, especially after Mom passed 10 years later. Alone in the house, surrounded by shadows and memories, the radio seemed to call to me. Not with sound, but with a weight in the air, a pull I couldn't explain. The first incident happened on a stormy night. Rain hammered the roof, wind rattled the windows. The electricity flickered and died. I went to the garage to find some candles. That's when I saw it, Dad's old radio. Dusty, static on the surface, just sitting there, waiting. I don't know why I touched it. Curiosity, maybe. Pull, maybe. I wiped the dust away, plugged it in. The hum was immediate. Low, steady, like the heartbeat of the house. I laughed nervously. It's just the storm, I whispered. And then I heard it. My name. Aaron. I froze. My pulse pounded. My breath hitched. Sounded like him. My father. The voice I hadn't heard in years. I stumbled back. Dad. I whispered. Nothing. The static hummed, but no answer. Then it came again, clearer. You shouldn't have turned it back on. The cold hit me then. Not the wind outside. Not the storm. Something inside the house, inside the air, that wrapped around me like icy fingers. I wanted to run, to yell, but my legs wouldn't move. I convinced myself it was my mind. After all, memories of my father were strong. Perhaps I was imagining the voice. But then it said my mother's name. Linda. She'd been gone for 10 years. And the voice, it wasn't angry. It wasn't pleading. It was calm. Familiar. Waiting. I felt it then, a presence. Watching. Patient. Waiting for me to make a move. My heartbeat thundered in my chest. The hum of the radio grew louder. like it had something to say that no one else could hear. For nights after, the radio whispered, sometimes names, sometimes memories, sometimes things I couldn't understand. Things from the past I hadn't remembered. Shadows moved in the corners of the garage. Cold crept into my bones. The house felt alive, and not in a good way. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. Every night, around midnight, the voices returned. Sometimes Dad, sometimes Mom, sometimes both. Sometimes something new, something darker. I knew then that the radio was more than a radio, that something in it, or something connected to it, hadn't left with my parents, that it had been waiting, and now it was reaching for me. And that's how it all began, with a storm, a dusty old radio, and voices that shouldn't exist anymore. Voices that were mine to hear whether I wanted to or not. The first night I realized it wasn't just imagination. The first night I knew something was reaching through the static. Started like any other stormy evening. Rain pattered against the roof, wind rattling the old windows. I had been in the living room, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the unease that had become normal in the house. It was around midnight when I heard it. Not the hum I was used to, but a whisper. My name. Clear. Aaron. I froze. The hair on my arms stood on end. My pulse raced. My body wanted to run, but my curiosity, or maybe my denial, kept me rooted. I whispered back, Dad. Silence. Then the whisper returned, slightly louder this time. Closer. Not from the garage, not from the walls. From everywhere. From nowhere. Aaron. I swallowed hard, feeling a cold trickle down my spine. The room seemed to stretch. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. I reached for the radio, though I knew it was unplugged, powerless. The moment my hand touched it, a low hum surged through the room. Not from electricity, not from sound. Something deeper, vibrations that rattled my bones. And then I heard another voice, softer, almost a sigh. My mother's. Aaron. Couldn't breathe. I stumbled backward, colliding with the couch. My heart felt like it would explode. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. Old memories, stress, sleep deprivation. But then the voices merged, overlapping, calling, coaxing, whispering fragments of memories. Childhood birthday parties, scraped knees, bedtime stories. Then things I didn't recognize, things I couldn't explain. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flee, but something held me there, gripping me with a cold, invisible hand. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees, listening. Then the air shifted. The room grew colder. Frost formed along the edges of the windows, curling like spiderwebs. My breath fogged in the air, and then I saw movement. Shadows shifting, stretching across the walls. Not my own. Not any shape I recognized. Figures that didn't belong. One shadow separated itself from the rest. Small at first, then taller, humanoid. Slowly, deliberately moving toward me. I scrambled backward, tripping over the coffee table. The hum of the radio intensified. The voices weren't just voices anymore. They were laughter, crying, murmurs, whispers in languages I didn't know, interwoven with fragments of my parents' voices. I got to my feet and ran, through the living room toward the garage door. The shadow followed, gliding across the floor. My legs burned. My lungs ached, but I couldn't stop. I reached the garage. I fumbled with the door handle. It wouldn't budge. Cold air gusted in through the cracks, carrying whispers I could almost understand. Aaron, come with us. And then I felt it, a touch. Not soft, not gentle, but firm, cold, pressing against my shoulder. I spun around, expecting something, but nothing was there. My flashlight, dead. My phone, no signal. And the radio, unplugged, still hummed, vibrating with a life of its own. The whispers intensified, forming words I could finally understand. You were always curious. Now you see. Now you listen, now you belong. I slammed the door open and bolted outside. The storm had eased into a drizzle, fog crawling low across the yard. The air was thick, heavy. I stumbled over wet grass, heart hammering. Then I stopped. Something drew my eyes to the old oak tree at the edge of the yard. Fog curled around it, moving like fingers. And there, just beyond the mist, I saw them, silhouettes. Not fully human, not fully shadow. Watching, waiting. A whisper floated on the wind. "Aaron, you're ours now." I don't remember how I got back inside. Only that I collapsed on the couch, soaked, shivering uncontrollably. The radio sat in the corner, silent, seemingly harmless. But I knew better. Every night since, the voices returned. Some nights just whispers. Some nights, full conversations. Sometimes laughter. Sometimes screams. Sometimes a lullaby that turns cold and sharp, like broken glass sliding across my skin. And every night, I see shadows. Not always in the same place. Not always the same shape. But always watching. Waiting. Patient. I've tried to explain it. To rationalize it. Tell myself it's grief. Sleep deprivation. Stress. But it's not. The radio isn't just a radio. The voices aren't just memories. And I know now. The past doesn't stay buried. It reaches. It waits. Calls. And tonight, I know it will call again. After that first terrifying night, I couldn't ignore what was happening. I couldn't pretend it was just my imagination. I knew that radio, my father's old shortwave, had a presence, a will, something that wanted to reach me. I didn't know why. I didn't know how. But I knew I had to understand it, even if it scared me more than anything else I'd ever faced. The next morning, I started with research. I dug through Dad's old notebooks, the ones he kept in the garage beside the radio. Handwritten notes about frequencies, call signs, distant stations, and strange occurrences he never told anyone. Some of the pages were illegible, smeared with what looked like water stains or maybe sweat. He'd circled certain frequencies in red ink, always noting the same thing: unstable, dangerous. I wasn't sure what he meant. Dangerous how? To whom? But I felt it already. Whatever my father had encountered, I was stepping into it now. That night, I turned the radio on again. I carefully tuned it to the frequency Dad had circled in one of the notebooks. Static filled the room, but beneath it, I could hear faint whispers, names, places, fragments of conversations I didn't recognize. Then it spoke, clearer than ever. My father's voice. "Aaron, you found it." I froze. The hairs on my arms and neck stood on end. "Dad, what is this?" I whispered. The static swelled. And then my mother's voice joined him. Soft, almost mournful. "You shouldn't be here." The voices weren't just memories anymore. They had intent. They weren't comforting or nostalgic. They were warning me, guiding me, or maybe testing me. I decided I needed to record everything. I set up an old tape recorder on the garage shelf right beside the radio. If this was real, if what I was hearing wasn't my mind breaking, I needed proof. I needed to understand. Hours passed. The storm outside returned, wind howling against the house. The radio hummed steadily, then whispers, first indistinct, then clear. "Aaron, come closer. See the truth." I leaned in. The static thickened, almost choking me with sound. And then, in a split second, I saw it. A figure barely visible standing behind the radio. It wasn't fully human, but it wasn't fully shadow either. Seemed waiting, patient, watching. I stumbled backward. My hands shook. The recorder continued to click and whir, picking up every whisper, every breath, every chilling syllable that formed words I couldn't comprehend. For weeks, I listened to the recordings. Every night the voices changed, evolved, revealing snippets of my father's experiences. Memories I didn't know existed, secrets of the town, the house, even the radio itself. One night, the voice said something I couldn't ignore. "You must leave before it takes more than your curiosity." Curiosity, that's what had always gotten me into trouble. And I realize now it might be the thing that destroys me. Then objects in the garage began moving on their own. The radio itself would tilt slightly, as if reacting to the voices. My father's tools clattered off the workbench, scattered across the concrete floor, and I wasn't imagining it. The tape recorder picked it all up. Metallic clanging, faint whispers, urgent murmurs. I tried to leave the garage once, but the door wouldn't budge. The air was heavy, thick, almost viscous. Cold seeped into my bones, freezing my movements, locking my breath. And then I felt it again. A presence brushing against my shoulder, circling me, invisible yet tangible. It was then I understood. The radio wasn't just transmitting voices. It was a gateway, a conduit to something beyond. Something that had been connected to my father, and now, through me, it wanted more. Couldn't sleep. I barely ate. Days blurred together, but the recordings continued. They told stories. Whispers of places my father had never visited, warnings of things I couldn't yet see, instructions in languages that made my stomach twist. One night, I dared to follow them. The static formed shapes, faint shadows in the corner of the garage. They pointed toward the back wall, and there, behind the old storage shelves, I found a hidden compartment. Inside, a collection of papers yellowed with age, diagrams of the radio frequency charts, symbols I couldn't recognize, and photographs, black and white images of my father standing beside a man I didn't know. A man with eyes so dark, so hollow, it felt like they could swallow me whole. The voices grew frantic, excited. My father's voice pleading, my mother's voice warning. I realized in that moment that whatever this was, it was alive. It watched. It learned. It had been watching my father long before me, guiding him, testing him, maybe even controlling him. I left the garage that night with a pounding heart. I couldn't tell anyone. The town would call me crazy, but I knew the truth. I had touched something old, something patient, something hungry, and the radio, it hummed softly in the dark, waiting. After discovering the hidden compartment in the garage, I couldn't sleep. Every night, the radio hummed, the whispers creeping into my dreams, lingering in the shadows of my room. I started keeping a notebook, trying to write down every word, every sound, every fleeting shadow I caught out of the corner of my eye. The first time it touched me directly, I knew this wasn't just some trick of the mind. I was in the garage, sitting on the concrete floor, flashlight shaking in my hand, tape recorder beside me. The static grew louder than usual, almost drowning out my own breathing. And then I felt it, a hand. Not cold, exactly, but heavy, icy, like metal pressing against my skin. I spun around. Nothing. My flashlight flickered. The air smelled of something metallic, like blood, but faint, old, decaying. The radio clicked on by itself. A low, deliberate hum filled the garage. Then the voice came. Not my father's this time. Not my mother's. Something new. Something older than the house, older than the town. A voice that rasped like dry leaves scraping concrete. Aaron, you are here, finally. The hairs on my neck bristled. My knees buckled. I realized I wasn't just hearing it. I was feeling it. Every nerve in my body screamed, warning me to flee. But I couldn't. My curiosity, my obsession had me pinned. The tape recorder picked up words I could barely understand. The static formed shapes, almost like letters, twisting in the air around me. I reached out, trying to touch them. The second my fingers brushed the air, the temperature dropped sharply. My breath came out in thick clouds, and then I felt it again, brushing against my shoulder, moving down my arm, cold and insistent. I fell backward, crashing into the workbench. Tools scattered, the hum of the radio rising, voices overlapping. I couldn't tell one from the other. My father's voice pleading, my mother's voice scolding, and the new voice patient, commanding, cold. I screamed, and then silence. For hours, nothing moved. The radio sat there, lifeless, as if nothing had happened. I checked the tape recorder. The static was recorded, the whispers faintly audible, but the weight in the room, the pressure, the ice in my veins, that wasn't captured. That was real. The next morning, I noticed something else. Marks. Small scratches along my forearm. Not deep, but enough to draw blood. I hadn't been touched by anything tangible. And yet, there they were. My skin burned where they appeared. Over the next few nights, the encounters became more direct. Objects moved on their own. The radio tuned itself to strange, distant frequencies. Sometimes I would hear voices in languages I didn't know. Sometimes my parents' voices would speak over them, guiding me, warning me. And sometimes, I swear I could hear other things. Something old, something hungry, whispering from beyond. One night I saw her, a figure, a girl, pale with dark, hollow eyes. She stood near the oak tree at the edge of the yard, her hair tangled, wet from rain, staring straight at me. She didn't move, but I felt her presence, heavy and demanding. The fog curled around her, shifting, almost like it had a life of its own. "Aaron," the radio whispered. I knew it wasn't safe. I knew I should run, but something in me wanted to approach her. My father had warned me in those scattered notebook entries about obsession, about listening too closely. But I couldn't help myself. I stepped closer. The fog thickened, pressing against my face, curling around my legs. My heart pounded. The girl raised a hand, and suddenly I was pulled forward. Not by wind, not by anything I could see. Something invisible, strong, gripping me, dragging me toward her. I stumbled, fell to my knees. The radio hummed louder, almost singing, almost alive. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the grip released. I scrambled back, gasping, drenched in sweat, shivering. That night, I understood something terrifying. The voices weren't just memories. They weren't just echoes of my parents. They were alive. They were sentient. And they were testing me, shaping me, trying to draw me into a world I couldn't yet comprehend. I barricaded the garage door. I unplugged the radio. I tried to sleep, but it was no use. Shadows moved in my room. Whispers came through my closed windows. The air carried that metallic, decaying smell. And the girl, I saw her at the edge of my vision, always just out of reach. I started losing track of time. Days blurred into nights. Sleep became impossible. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, and the radio never stopped. I knew I had to confront it. I knew I couldn't keep hiding, but I had no idea what I was dealing with. No idea how powerful it was, and no idea if I would survive the night. After that night, after the girl appeared at the edge of the yard and the radio hummed with its strange life, I realized I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever was in that radio, whatever had been tied to my father, it wasn't just content with whispers or shadows. It wanted attention. It wanted control. I started keeping a journal, writing every event, every word, every sound, every movement. Because if I went insane, I needed evidence. Proof that this wasn't just grief or stress or isolation talking. It began subtly. I'd hear footsteps in the living room when I was alone. Not the creak of the floorboards, but deliberate steps, pacing, circling me. The radio, unplugged, would suddenly click on. Static, low at first, then forming words I could almost understand. "Aaron, you shouldn't be here." I would look around, heart hammering, but there would be nothing. Only the fog creeping along the corners of the room. The shadows stretching longer than any light source should allow. Then came the knocks. First, I thought someone had broken in. 3 short raps on the window, 3 on the garage door. But the doors were locked. No one was outside. The rain had stopped. The night was silent, except for the insistent tapping. I got close to the radio, and that's when I felt it again. A touch, soft but firm, on my arm. Cold. I spun around, but nothing was there. And then I heard her laugh. Lydia. Soft. Musical. Innocent at first. But underneath it, a rasp. A hunger. I tried leaving the garage, but the door wouldn't budge. The shadows moved differently now. Following me, converging, almost forming shapes. Faces. Not fully formed, but enough to make me recoil. One of them looked like my father, twisted, shadowed, watching me. The radio hummed louder, vibrating through the floor, and the girl, Lydia, appeared again. this time inside the garage. Fog wrapped around her like a cloak. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale, almost transparent. She didn't speak. She just stared, waiting. I fell to my knees. My notebook slipped from my hands. The papers scattered. And then I understood. She wasn't just a figure. She was part of the radio, part of the static, part of something older than my family, older than the house. I tried shouting at her, "Leave me alone." Nothing. And then she smiled. I don't think you can understand what that smile looked like. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't human. It was patient. Promised something. Pain, probably. Maybe death. But it also beckoned. From that night on, I couldn't sleep in my own bed. Not without the radio playing. Not without the static, the whispers, the lullaby. I started hearing voices everywhere. The fridge hummed. The television emitted static even when unplugged. The air conditioner whispered my name. And Lydia, always Lydia. Waiting, watching, learning. I became obsessed. Obsession replaced fear. I needed to understand her. I needed to know why she was here, why she had chosen me. And the radio, the cursed, humming, alive radio, became my only guide. One night, I traced the frequencies again, searching for her, listening to her. And this time, I understood her language, not words exactly, but feelings, images, memories, whispers of events I hadn't lived, places I hadn't been. But they felt real and horrifying. She showed me things. A man disappearing into a cornfield, screaming, never found. Children laughing in a pond, their eyes hollow. A farmhouse collapsing, its inhabitants trapped inside. And all of it tied to that radio, tied to whoever she was, tied to the shadows that crept behind me even in daylight. The physical manifestations increased. My bedroom walls would sweat, doors slammed, windows rattled violently even without wind. Objects flew. I once woke up to my chair being thrown across the room. No explanation, no one around, but her presence was undeniable. I began to lose myself. Hours blurred into days, days into nights. The radio never stopped. Lydia never left. And I knew deep down she never would. I reached a breaking point. I decided to confront her. I grabbed the radio and carried it outside during a storm. Rain poured, wind howled, lightning flashing across the sky. I held it up and screamed, "Enough! I'm done listening. I'm done." And for a second, silence. Then the hum returned, louder than ever, and I felt her standing behind me, hands on my shoulders. I didn't turn, couldn't. I wanted to die, but I didn't. "Aaron," she whispered, "you can't leave. Not yet." The radio slipped from my hands. It hit the ground. Static exploded into the storm. And then she vanished. For a few hours it was quiet, almost peaceful. But I knew it was temporary. I had looked into the darkness and touched it. And it had touched me back. And now, it's just a matter of time before she returns. The silence didn't last. It never does. 2 nights after the storm, I woke up to find the radio back on my desk, plugged in, turned on. I never brought it back inside. At first, I thought maybe I had done it myself. Sleepwalking, maybe. But the cord, it was melted, like it had been burned through and fused to the wall outlet. And yet, the static buzzed on, loud and alive. I sat there, staring at it in the dark, every hair on my body standing on end. The clock read 3:13 a.m., the same time my father used to wake up screaming. That number, 313, it kept showing up. On receipts, on my phone battery, once even carved into the frost on my truck windshield. And then that night, Lydia spoke again, but not from the radio, from behind me. "You shouldn't have left me in the storm." I froze. My throat went dry. I turned around, and she was there. Not fog this time, not some faint outline, full, almost human. Her hair was wet, sticking to her face. Her dress was tattered, soaked through. Her eyes were pure white. No pupils, no emotion, just an emptiness that felt older than time. "You can hear me now," she said. "You opened the door." I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I couldn't move. The air felt thick, like syrup. My body wouldn't obey. And then she smiled again. That same slow, horrifying grin. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, like someone was pushing their fingers through my skull. I don't remember falling, but I woke up on the floor hours later. The radio was silent, and on the wall above it, written in dripping black, "Where's room 313? The next few days are a blur." Sleep meant nothing anymore. When I closed my eyes, I saw her, standing at the edge of my bed, whispering things I didn't understand. When I opened them, she was gone, but her voice stayed. Sometimes it came through the pipes, sometimes the vents, once through my phone when it wasn't even on. They buried me there. They never stopped the broadcast. "You have to finish it." I thought maybe she was tied to a location, that if I found this room 313, I could set her free. I started searching. I went through the old radio logs my father kept. He'd worked for a local AM station, one that shut down years before I was born. WQNR, small-town broadcast, mostly weather and late-night talk shows. But there was one folder he'd labeled Room 313. No date, no context, just recordings, old cassette tapes brittle with age. When I played the first one, I heard his voice, and hers. My father on tape. "Lydia, if you can hear me, this isn't funny anymore." Lydia, faintly, "You said you'd let me through." Then static, then screaming, then silence. I don't know how long I listened, but by the end, I realized the truth. My father hadn't been broadcasting weather reports. He'd been broadcasting her. I drove out to the remains of the station the next morning. A decaying concrete building miles outside town, buried under vines and silence. Inside, it smelled of rust and rot. The air was thick, wet, suffocating. Every step echoed. The walls were lined with soundproof foam that had rotted into fungus. And in the back, there it was, room 313. The door was still marked with my father's name. The knob was cold, like metal left in snow. Pushed it open. The room was small, maybe 10 by 10. A cracked soundboard, broken microphones, a rusted on-air sign that still flickered faintly. And in the middle of the floor, the same model of radio I had at home. I felt her before I saw her. That pressure in my skull again. That chill that makes your teeth ache. The lights dimmed. The static roared to life, louder than ever. And then she was there, standing beside the old soundboard, her face barely illuminated by the flickering on-air light. "You came back," she said. He didn't finish the broadcast. I could barely breathe. My father had warned me. He'd always said the radio could talk back if you tuned too deep into the dark. And now I knew what he meant. I stepped closer. "What do you want from me?" She tilted her head, almost childlike. To be heard. And suddenly, every speaker, every broken piece of equipment in that room came alive. Voices screamed, laughed, cried. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them, all tangled in static. And beneath them all, one voice. My father's, whispered my name. "Aaron, don't let her out." The door slammed shut. The lights went out. The air went cold enough to hurt. I stumbled back, reaching for the knob, but it wouldn't move. The static built until it was all I could hear. My vision blurred. My nose started bleeding. And then, clear as day, right beside my ear, she whispered, "You already did." When I came to, it was morning. The door was open. The radio was gone. I stumbled outside, shaking, half blind from the light. The building was empty, completely silent, but I could still hear the static. Not in my ears, not in my head, but under everything, like the world itself was humming. When I got home, my house was freezing. My breath fogged the air. The lights flickered, and the radio, the one that had vanished, was sitting on the kitchen table, clean, polished, perfectly still. And on its dial, etched in red, was a single phrase. The broadcast never ends. To room 313, I should have run. I should have left the radio, left the town, left everything behind. But I didn't. Curiosity, obsession, maybe stupidity. Whatever it was, I stayed. And that's when it got worse. The radio never left my house. I never saw it being placed there, never heard footsteps. I woke up one morning to find it on the kitchen counter, humming quietly, static filling the corners of the room. Every night, Lydia came back, sometimes at the end of the hallway, sometimes standing behind the shower curtain, sometimes, I swear, inside the mirror, grinning. I began to hear voices even when the radio was off. They didn't whisper anymore. They shouted, screamed, they argued. Hundreds of voices overlapping, incoherent yet purposeful. Aaron, finish it. Turn it back on. Why did you leave me? I tried to block it out. Tried wearing headphones. Tried moving the radio outside into the yard. Tried burning it. Nothing worked. The static followed me. The whispers followed me. Even when I left the house, I started hearing things on my phone. Messages I didn't send. Calls from numbers I didn't know. Voicemail boxes filled with static and laughter. Sometimes the recordings were of me sleeping. Sometimes of me talking. But not my words. Their words. Commands. Warnings. Please. One night, I was awake for hours trying to sleep, trying to ignore it. But then the voice spoke clearly. Aaron, you belong to the broadcast now. I froze. My blood ran cold. My room, once familiar, felt alien. The walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with the static. My bed sagged under a weight I couldn't see. Then I heard footsteps, close, circling me. She was here, Lydia, her presence pressing down like water. I dared to open my eyes. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, wet hair plastered to her face, hollow eyes staring straight into mine. Why are you afraid? She asked. I didn't answer, couldn't. I was paralyzed, every nerve screaming, every thought screaming, every muscle locked. You heard them, she said. All of them. Every broadcast. Every scream. Every whisper. You're mine now. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe minutes. Maybe hours. The next day, my mind started slipping. I couldn't tell reality from hallucination. Every shadow in my room had a voice. Every reflection whispered my name. Every radio, every speaker, every phone. It was all alive. And the tape recordings I'd made, they started changing. I would play them back, and new whispers would appear. Commands I didn't hear before. Voices of my father screaming, pleading, warning. Aaron, it never ends. Don't listen. I began to hallucinate her everywhere. The streets, the store, the park, she was there. Watching, waiting, silently grinning. I stopped leaving my house. Stopped answering calls. Stopped going outside. But the radio never stopped. It hummed. It whispered. It laughed. And one night, I realized it wasn't just the radio. It was me. Every thought I had, every word I spoke, every heartbeat. All of it pulsed with static, with whispers. I couldn't think my own thoughts anymore. I couldn't speak my own words. It was Lydia, it was the broadcast, it was the radio. Aaron, you're finally ready, she said. I screamed, but no sound came out. The hallucinations grew worse. The walls bled shadows. Mirrors reflected not my face, but hers. The air grew thick, unbreathable. Every night she drew closer. Every day my sanity slipped further. I tried to destroy the radio again. I tried smashing it, burning it, drowning it. Nothing worked. Every attempt ended the same. I would wake up, exhausted, broken, and the radio would be waiting for me in the same spot, humming softly, static leaking into the air like fog. And the whispers, they never stopped. Aaron, finish it. You know what you must do. I didn't know. I didn't understand. But I felt it, deep in my chest. The pull of something ancient, relentless, patient. Something that had been waiting for me my whole life. I started writing again, trying to capture the voices, trying to leave a record in case I didn't survive. But the voices would overwrite me. They would speak through my hand. Words I never thought, thoughts I never had. And the last entry I wrote that night, I don't even remember. Only the words remain, scratched onto the page in shaky, frantic handwriting. She is everywhere. I am nothing. The broadcast never sleeps. She waits. I am hers. I don't know how long I've been trapped in this loop. Days? Weeks? Months? Time doesn't exist the way it used to. Every night is the same. The static hums. The whispers crawl under my skin. And Lydia, she's closer now than ever. The radio sits at the end of my bed, always plugged in, alive, waiting. She appears in every reflection. Every shadow moves like her. She's patient, deliberate, never leaving, never tired, never silent. Last night, I tried one last thing. I thought I could confront her, end it, destroy the source. I took the radio into the garage, poured gasoline over it, and struck a match. The flames roared. Smoke filled the room. I thought I'd finally free myself. But she appeared in the fire. Not a hallucination. Not a trick of my mind. She was real. She was there. "You can't destroy me," she whispered, her voice rising over the crackle of the flames. "You belong to the broadcast now." The fire burned my hands. I screamed. The flames licked my face. And yet, she was unharmed. She reached through the smoke, her fingers brushing my cheek. Ice, sharp, cutting. The radio exploded. Glass and sparks flew. The room went dark. I should have been free. I wasn't, because the moment the explosion ended, I heard it. Static, faint, distant. And then my own voice. "Aaron, you shouldn't have left me alone." I stumbled backward, my chest heaving. The walls of the garage stretched and warped. Shadows elongated. My reflection in a broken mirror showed her face, not mine. And then I realized the broadcast isn't the radio. It's me. Every thought, every heartbeat, every movement. Part of her. Part of Lydia. Part of this endless loop. I tried to scream. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Only static. Only whispers. I don't know who I am anymore. Maybe I never did. The last thing I remember, before the world shifted completely, she said, "Welcome home," and then silence. Now, sometimes I hear the faint hum in my dreams. Sometimes, when the wind howls, I swear I can hear static creeping through the walls of houses. Radios turning on by themselves, voices whispering names. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's her. Maybe it's you. The broadcast never ends. It never sleeps. It waits. And one day, if you listen too closely, it might find you.
Welcome back, listeners to Midnight Radio Horror, the station that keeps you company when the rest of the world is fast asleep. I'm your host, Ezra Kane, inviting you to settle in. Let the rain tap against your window and drift into tonight's tale. Remember, if you're listening right now, you're not alone. There's always someone awake with you, somewhere. Now, turn off your lights, because tonight's story is called The Man Under the Streetlight.
It started about 3 months ago. I live on the 4th floor of an old apartment complex, the kind that smells like damp concrete and reheated curry. I moved here because it was cheap, quiet, and close to work. Every night, when I get home from my shift, I'd make tea, sit by my window, and just watch. The city always looked softer at night, like all the ugliness melted into the dark. But then I noticed him, a man standing under the streetlight directly across from my building. Always the same spot, always the same time, around 1:15 a.m. At first, I thought he was waiting for someone, or maybe he was a cab driver taking a break. But he never moved, never looked at his phone, never smoked. He just stood there. I told myself it wasn't my business, but every night I kept checking, and every night he was there. After a week, I started to expect him. I'd make tea at exactly 1 in the morning, turn off my room light, and sit by the window. I even started narrating little stories about him in my head, like he was a character from a movie. Sometimes I imagined he was lost. Sometimes I thought he was remembering someone he'd lost. Sometimes I wondered if he was remembering me. That's when I began leaving my curtains open. One night, around 2 a.m., I leaned a bit too close to the glass, and that's when it happened. He tilted his head, just slightly, as if he'd noticed me. It was the tiniest movement, but it froze me. I stepped back from the window, my heart hammering, whispering to myself that it was just coincidence. But after that night, it didn't feel like I was watching him anymore. It felt like he was watching me. 2 weeks later, I told my friend Mia about it over lunch. She laughed. Maybe he's your secret admirer. Yeah, or a serial killer, I joked back. But my voice sounded shaky even to me. When I got home that night, I tried to ignore the window. I turned on the TV, blasted music, scrolled through my phone. But the longer I avoided looking, the more unbearable the curiosity became. At exactly 1:15, I gave in. I peeked through the curtain, and he was gone. I felt a weird disappointment, like missing a TV episode after watching every night for weeks. But then, as I turned away from the window, I caught something in the reflection of the glass. Movement. I spun back, and there he was, closer this time. Not under the streetlight anymore, but in the middle of the road, directly facing my building. My heart dropped. I pulled the curtains shut, so hard the rod nearly came off the wall. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak, every hum from the radiator sounded like footsteps. By morning, I convinced myself I was overreacting. I even laughed about it, told myself I was being dramatic. But the next night, curiosity won again. And when I finally opened the curtain, he wasn't there. Still, something felt wrong. My eyes drifted down, and that's when I saw it. On the sidewalk below my window, a small, folded note, weighed down by a stone. I stared at it for a long time. Then I whispered to no one. He left something. I didn't go down that night, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. By morning, I gave in. I threw on a hoodie and went outside, pretending to check my mail. The note was still there, a little damp from the dew. I picked it up, hands trembling. It was plain white paper, no envelope, no name. When I unfolded it, there was only one sentence, written in small, neat handwriting. You should close your curtains. I didn't sleep that morning. I just sat at my table, staring at the note. You should close your curtains. He knew. He knew I'd been watching him. Every thought spun in circles. Was it a threat? A warning? A joke? At one point, I even convinced myself it was from someone in the building, a prank. But by evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me back. I taped my curtains shut just to stop the urge to look. But even with the tape, I could still feel the light leaking through the edges, a soft glow pressing against the dark room like it wanted it. I told myself not to look. Not tonight. But at 1:15 a.m., I looked anyway. The street was empty. No one there. Relief came fast, almost giddy. Maybe he'd finally stopped. Then the street light flickered. Once. Twice. And then it went out completely. Darkness swallowed the street. That's when I heard it. 2 slow knocks at my door. I froze. My apartment suddenly felt very small, very exposed. No one ever visits me this late. The knocks came again. Soft. Patient. Not loud enough to wake the neighbors. Just for me. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Then a faint scrape, like paper sliding across the floor. After a few seconds, I peeked through the peephole. No one. But taped to the door was another note. I opened it with shaking hands. You shouldn't have looked. The next morning, I told the building manager everything. The man, the notes, the knocks. He barely looked up from his paperwork. No one's reported anything, ma'am. We don't have cameras on that side. He gave me a polite smile, the kind people give when they think you're imagining things. I laughed nervously, pretended it was fine, and went back upstairs. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I needed to know. So I decided to wait for him. At 1 a.m., I grabbed my coat and went down to the street. The air was damp, the light still flickering weakly overhead. I stood under it right where he used to stand. It felt colder there, as if the air itself was different. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then I looked up. At my own apartment window. Someone was standing there, a dark outline against the curtains, motionless, staring down at me, exactly where I used to sit. I ran, first through the stairwell, tripping up the steps. By the time I reached my floor, the hallway was silent. I unlocked my door, heart hammering, and froze. The curtains were closed again, perfectly, and on the glass was a handprint, pressed deep like someone had been leaning there, not mine. I left the lights on that night, and every night after. But every time I pass the window now, I see movement in the reflection, a faint shape standing behind me, just out of focus. Always where the light hits the floor. Sometimes I think about opening the curtain again, just once. But then I remember the last note. You shouldn't have looked. I've stopped checking the time. But my body still knows when it's near 1:15. It starts with that low, crawling anxiety like static under my skin. For a while, nothing happened. No new notes. No knocks. No movement. I started believing it was over. Then one night, I woke up to a sound. 3 taps. Even. Slow. Coming from behind the wall near my bed. At first, I thought it was the pipes again. This building's full of them. But then it happened again. 3 taps. A pause. 3 more. Like someone waiting for me to answer. The next night, it came again, same time, same rhythm. I stared at the wall, heart pounding, and before I knew what I was doing, I tapped back. 3 times. Silence. Then 3 more taps. This time closer. It didn't come from behind the wall anymore. It came from the floor. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the cracks in the wooden boards. Every now and then, I swore I heard faint breathing, slow, patient. The next morning, I checked under the bed. Of course, nothing. But the dust had been disturbed, a clear drag mark, as if someone had slid something heavy beneath there recently. I called Mia, my only friend who still talked to me about this. She told me to get out of the apartment for a few days. I tried. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, I felt it like the walls were leaning in. Every door was closed. Every sound felt muted. I went back inside. That evening, I tried drowning it all out with music. I turned the speakers up, blasted white noise until the whole room trembled. But underneath the sound, I could still hear it. Talk, 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 and then a whisper. So faint I thought it was the music warping. But when I turned the volume down, it was clearer. A man's voice, right behind me. Why did you look? I spun around, nothing. Just my reflection in the dark window, trembling. I stared at myself, chest rising and falling too fast. Then I noticed it. My reflection wasn't moving like me. It blinked slower, smiled wider, and then the reflection lifted its hand. and placed it gently against the glass. From the inside, I stumbled back, knocking over my chair. The reflection didn't move anymore, just stayed there, palm pressed to the window. I turned on every light, every lamp, every bulb in the apartment. But even in the brightness, I could still see the faint outline of that handprint. Fresh, greasy, like someone had just pressed it there. The next day, I begged the landlord to let me switch units. He said everything was full. He looked annoyed when I wouldn't stop talking. Before I left his office, he sighed and said, "Ma'am, the unit across from yours has been empty for months. Maybe what you're hearing is the building settling." The unit across from mine, the one directly behind my bedroom wall, the one where the tapping came from. That night, I couldn't sit still. I kept staring at my door, at the wall, at the cracks near the floor. The air felt heavier than usual, warm, damp, almost humid, like someone was breathing right beside me. I tried to convince myself it was panic, but then, from behind the wall, I heard it again. Tap, 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 followed by a slow, dragging sound. And then, something whispered right into my ear, not from behind the wall, not from outside, from inside the room. "I told you not to look." I didn't leave my apartment for 2 days. I didn't eat much, didn't sleep at all. I just sat there listening to the wall. Sometimes the tapping came from inside it, sometimes from under the floorboards. Sometimes it came from behind me. I knew what everyone would say: stress, paranoia, lack of sleep. But I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. That handprint was still on the window. No matter how many times I cleaned it, it came back. Always the same shape, always the same size. Like it wasn't on the glass, but inside it. On the third night, I decided to end it. Not my life, just the fear. I was going to see what was behind that wall. I moved the bed away and pressed my ear to the plaster. There was again faint breathing, slow, rhythmic, and then a whisper, closer. I froze. My heart hammered so hard it hurt, but the voice didn't sound angry anymore. It sounded tired, like it had been waiting. I grabbed a kitchen knife and used it to chip away at the paint. Then the plaster. The sound grew louder. Each scrape echoed through the room like bones cracking. Dust filled the air, coating my throat. Behind the plaster was old brick, rough and uneven. But in the center, there was something else, a square outline. A sealed door. I pulled at it until the edges started to crumble. The smell hit me first, cold, rotten air, like something that hadn't moved in a long time. I shone my phone's flashlight inside. It was a narrow gap, maybe a foot deep, and at the far end, something was written on the brick. Tiny scratches forming words. "I used to watch you too." I dropped the phone. The screen cracked, plunging everything into half-darkness. I backed away, shaking, my breath catching. Then, from inside the wall, I heard it. The scraping sound of nails dragging slowly against brick. Coming closer. I stumbled toward the door, but it wouldn't open. The lock jammed, like someone was holding it shut from the other side. Then the whisper again, right next to my ear. "You shouldn't have opened it." The lights flickered. For a split second, I saw something in the reflection of the window. Not a man, not a shadow. Something gray, human-shaped, but wrong. Too thin, too still. Its face pressed against the glass from the inside. I screamed. The lights went out completely, and in the dark, something crawled out of the wall. I couldn't see it, but I could hear it. The sound of dry skin sliding against plaster. The weight of something pulling itself across the floor. I hid in the corner, covering my mouth, praying it would go away. Then silence. For a moment, I thought maybe it was gone, but when I opened my eyes, it was standing in front of me, its face inches from mine, pale, hollow-eyed, smiling, and it whispered, almost gently, "I'm not outside anymore." I don't remember how long I stayed frozen in that corner. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't exist anymore. All I knew was the air was thick and cold, and the thing in front of me watched. Its smile never faded. Its eyes never blinked. It tilted its head, as if studying me. I realized in that moment that I wasn't just afraid of it. I was fascinated, drawn to it, Then the scraping sound started again behind me this time. Something was moving across the floor, circling me. The thing in front didn't move, but I felt its attention shift. It wasn't just watching me, it was controlling me. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall. A loose brick fell, revealing the narrow gap where it had come from. The wall was empty now, but the air smelled of decay and wet earth. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The next thing I remember was daylight. I was lying on the floor, soaked in sweat. The apartment was silent. The wall where the hidden door had been resealed. Not a crack, not a handprint. I called the police. When they arrived, I tried to explain, told them about the notes, the tapping, the man, the wall. They looked at me like I was insane. "You're safe now," one officer said, not even looking at the wall. We checked the building. Nothing unusual here. No signs of forced entry. No hidden doors. I tried to tell them I'd seen it. The thing in my apartment. The hollow face. The nails scraping against the bricks. They smiled politely and told me to get some rest. I left the apartment that day. I haven't returned. I don't think I'll ever go back. But sometimes when I pass by that street at night, I see a figure standing under the same streetlight. It doesn't move. It doesn't blink. And for a brief moment, I swear it's looking right at me. I've moved twice since then. I keep my curtains closed. I check my locks 3 times before sleeping. And yet, sometimes, just sometimes, I hear it. The faint tapping from inside the walls. And I know it isn't finished. I thought moving would fix it. New place, new walls, new view. No streetlight outside my window this time. Just a narrow alley and a brick wall. But fear doesn't care about geography. It just follows. For the first week, everything was quiet. Too quiet. No creaking pipes. No tapping. No strange reflections. I started to think maybe it really had been my imagination. A slow collapse of sanity under too many sleepless nights. I told myself I'd imagine the man. The nose. The face behind the glass. But on the 8th night, I woke up at 1:15. For no reason at all. And I saw it. A faint circle of light glowing against the opposite wall. Like a streetlight, where there shouldn't be one. I got out of bed, heart pounding. There was no lamp, no light source. The glow seemed to bleed straight through the bricks. Pale, cold, and steady. I approached it slowly. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't light at all. It was a reflection of my old apartment window, the one I'd left behind. And in that reflection, standing perfectly still was him, the man under the streetlight. I stumbled backward, knocking into my dresser. The reflection flickered, like static. Then it was gone, just my trembling shadow on the wall. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in the corner with the lights on, whispering to myself that I was dreaming, that I was safe. But the next morning, when I went to make coffee, I noticed something on the counter. A note. Plain white paper. No envelope. You moved. I dropped it immediately, but the paper didn't fall. It stuck to my hand, like it had been wet. When I finally peeled it off, my palm was covered in black dust, like soot. I ran to the sink and washed it off. The water turned gray. And when it cleared, my reflection in the faucet was smiling. I wasn't. That night, I taped over every reflective surface in the apartment. Mirrors, glass, the TV, even the framed photos. But around 1 a.m., I heard it again. Talk, talk, talk. Not from the walls this time. From the mirror in the hallway. The one I'd taped over. I walked toward it slowly. The tape was trembling, like something was pressing against it from behind. Then, faintly, a voice. You can't hide from where you look. The tape split open down the middle. And behind it, my reflection. Only it wasn't moving with me. It was waiting. It lifted its hand, pressed its palm against the glass, and whispered, "Look again." I covered the mirror again, this time with cardboard. Thick, heavy, taped from every edge. But even then, I could still hear it. A soft scraping sound from behind the glass. like fingernails tracing letters I couldn't see. I turned up the music. Didn't help. I started talking to myself out loud. Anything to drown it out. But every time I stopped, it would tap twice. Once for me, once for him. I told myself I wouldn't look again. That no matter what happened, I'd leave the mirror covered. But fear has a strange way of feeling like curiosity. By the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what it was doing behind there. So I peeled back one corner. Just one. The first thing I saw was my eye. But it wasn't in the same place as mine. It was closer. Too close to the surface. Then the rest of the reflection moved. Not like me. It tilted its head slowly, smiling too wide, teeth too small. And in the reflection's background, the streetlight was back. Behind me, I spun around. Nothing. But when I turned back to the mirror, the reflection wasn't alone. The man was there again, standing just behind her. Behind me, he leaned close to her ear and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then she nodded, and the reflection pressed her hand to the glass again. This time, the surface bent, like it was breathing. I ran to the other side of the room, grabbed a blanket, and threw it over the mirror. Then I sat there all night, clutching my phone, waiting for dawn. When the sun came up, I checked again. The blanket was gone, and the mirror was clean. Too clean, like someone had wiped it down. In the center of the glass, I saw a single handprint. Not mine. Smaller. And darker. That afternoon, I went to a hardware store and bought a hammer. If I couldn't cover it, I'd destroy it. When I came home, I swung the hammer hard. The mirror cracked, but no sound came out. Not glass shattering. Not echo. Just silence. The crack spread, spiraling like veins. And in each broken fragment, I saw something different. His face, his hand, his eyes. Hundreds of them, all watching. Then they blinked. I dropped the hammer and fell backward. Every piece of glass started sliding down the wall, like liquid silver draining away. When it was over, the mirror was gone. Only the wall remained. Except now, the wall was breathing. Slowly, like lungs under paint. That night, I heard his voice again. Not through the mirror, not from the window, from inside the wall. He said, "You brought the light with you." And then, I'm almost out. It started with the humming. There, on the opposite wall, was his shadow, standing perfectly still, under a faint glow that wasn't supposed to exist. And just before it faded, I heard his voice one last time. Quiet, almost kind. "Now, it's your turn to stand under the light." The next morning, everything felt different. The apartment was too still, the air heavier. The shadows didn't move with the light anymore. They just waited. I tried to make coffee, but the mug slipped from my hand. I wasn't even shaking. It was like my fingers didn't belong to me. When I looked down, they were pale. Not the soft kind of pale from tiredness, but the dull, drained kind, like the blood had forgotten where to go. I caught my reflection in the microwave door, and I froze, because my eyes weren't moving right. The rest of me turned left, but my reflection looked right. Then it blinked, and I didn't. That's when I realized what the light had done. It hadn't just shown me him. It had opened something. A window, maybe, or a doorway. And now he wasn't just behind the wall. He was behind my eyes. Every time I blinked, I saw flashes, not of my apartment, but of the streetlight. The one I'd left behind. The wet pavement. The faint hiss of rain. And his shape, standing exactly where I used to see him. Only now, I was looking from his side, through his eyes. I could feel him watching me, like 2 points of view tangled together. Every breath I took, he inhaled too. Every heartbeat echoed twice. I whispered, "Get out of me." And the whisper came back, from my own mouth, in his voice. "I can't. You invited me in when you looked." That night, I taped my eyes shut. Literally, medical tape. Tight enough that I couldn't open them even by accident. I thought if I can't see, he can't see. But somewhere in the dark, a low whisper crawled through the silence. "Then I'll open them for you." The tape tore off by itself, slowly, deliberately, like unseen fingers peeling it away. My eyelids twitched. Something forced them open, and I saw not the room, not the walls, not my hands. I saw the streetlight, and standing beneath it, a girl, me. She was looking up, her face pale, eyes wide, just like before. Only now I wasn't in her body. I was in his, watching her, and when I lifted my hand, so did he. He smiled and whispered through my lips, "Now we both see." I don't remember sleeping. I just remember waking up, though I'm not sure where. It wasn't my apartment anymore. It wasn't anywhere I'd ever been. Just darkness, endless and soft, and the faint hum of electricity in the air. Somewhere far off, I could see the light, that same pale circle, floating in nothing, flickering like a dying moon. I walked toward it, or maybe it pulled me closer. Each step made the hum louder, until it wasn't sound anymore, but a voice. Do you see now? The light pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Each flashed brighter than the last. I could almost make out shapes inside it, figures standing still, faces blurred, eyes open, hundreds of them, all staring toward the center, all staring at him. He was there, the man from under the streetlight. Only now he wasn't tall or thin. He wasn't anything at all. He was light itself, a shape made of the glow, vibrating softly, stretching out like arms reaching for me. "You brought me through," he said, "through the glass, through the walls, through your eyes." I wanted to scream, but I didn't have a mouth. "You looked," he said again, and what is seen cannot be unseen. He stepped closer, or maybe I did. When the light touched my skin, it didn't burn. It remembered. Flashes of my old apartment, the mirror, the notes, the shadow behind the wall. They all flickered inside the glow like fragments of a film reel. He leaned close. His voice was inside my head. "There is no outside," he whispered, "only where the light reaches." The faces behind him began to move. One by one, they lifted their heads, and I saw mine among them. My own face, eyes open, mouth trembling, frozen in the light like a photograph. And suddenly I remembered everything. Every time I'd stared into the glass, every second I'd spent watching him, every reflection that didn't move quite right. They weren't tricks. They were recordings. The light wasn't showing me him. It was saving me. Every time I looked, the man smiled. "You see what I am now," he said. "I'm not a person. I'm the memory of being seen." He reached out his hand. "Come stand under the light again. Let it finish what it started." I felt my body dissolve, like I was being pulled into the glow, pixel by pixel, thought by thought. And before everything went white, I heard one last whisper. "There's always someone watching." I woke up in my apartment. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, soft and warm, but something was off. The alley outside was glowing, not with streetlights, not with lamps. A cold, pale blue light seeped from every crack in the building, every wet patch of pavement, every street corner, and it moved. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was still dreaming, but the glow stayed, and in the center of it a silhouette, tall, thin, unmoving, just like him, watching, not a person, not human, the shape of everything I'd feared. I backed away from the window. The light followed. I spun around. It was behind me, flickering through the walls. The apartment was alive with it now. The humming started again, deep, vibrating. I could feel it in my chest, in my bones. Then a note appeared on my kitchen counter. "No envelope. No handwriting." Just a single line. "Look outside. They're all watching now." I forced myself to the window. Every reflection in the glass, myself, the empty room, was doubled, tripled, layered. And in each layer, the figure under the streetlight stood, watching. The glow spread further down the street. The neighbors, oblivious, moved through it, unaware. I realized I was the only one who could see, or maybe I was the only one left who mattered. I wanted to close the curtain. I wanted to hide. I wanted to scream. But the glow followed my eyes, creeping along the walls, stretching into the floorboards, into my bed. And in the center of it all, the same whisper. Now it's your turn to watch. I didn't move. I couldn't. The man, the light, had become everything. And in that moment, I realized I had already joined them. Every reflection, every shadow, every shape that moved just slightly wrong. All watching, all waiting. And now, so was I. I tried everything to make it stop. Covered the windows. Unplugged every light source. Sat in the dark for hours, hands shaking, waiting for silence. But the silence never came. The hum was still there, faint, constant, buried inside the walls, under the floor, inside my chest. Like it wasn't a sound anymore. It was a pulse, a rhythm, like something syncing itself with me. I tore open the breaker panel and flipped every switch. The hum didn't even flicker. Then the hallway light came on by itself. Not the bulb, the light. It just appeared, hovering in the center of the air, pale blue, spinning slowly. And inside it I could see shapes. People. No, not people. Copies. Versions of me, caught mid-blink, mid-breath, mid-scream. All frozen in the glow. I whispered, "What are you?" And the light whispered back. Not through sound, but through thought. "I'm the pattern." The room began to flicker, like a film reel stuttering through frames too fast to comprehend. I saw my apartment, then not my apartment. The streetlight, then a void. Me sitting on the bed, then me standing under the light. All happening at once. "You looked," the voice said. "So, I learned your shape." The walls bent outward, stretching like fabric. Every reflection, every mirror, every polished surface started to ripple with light. Inside each one, I saw a version of myself moving differently. One looked calm. One looked terrified. One smiled and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then I realized they weren't reflections. They were possibilities. All of them watching me. I stumbled backward, clutching my head. Reality felt wrong, uneven, like static under my skin. "I want to wake up," I said. "I want to go back." The voice answered, gentle and cold. "There is no back, only what the light remembers." The floor began to dissolve. The walls followed. Everything around me melted into lines of color, into noise, into light. And in the middle of it all, I saw the man again. He wasn't standing anymore. He was floating, stretched and thin, like a filament burning inside a bulb. "You see now," he said. "The light doesn't follow you. It creates you." My last thought before everything went white was simple. What if it had always been this way? What if the world I'd lived in was just one of many frames, flashing endlessly beneath the same silent streetlight? And maybe I was never haunted. Maybe I was just being remembered. I woke up in my apartment. It looked exactly as it always had. No broken walls. No flickering light. No glow. I breathed a shaky sigh of relief. Maybe it was over. But then I noticed the neighbor across the hall. She was watering her plants, humming a song. I waved. She turned, smiled, and said exactly what I had whispered to myself just moments before. "It's over. Everything's fine." I froze. I went to the kitchen, tried to make coffee. The sound of the kettle filled the room. Then the mailman knocked. "Good morning," he said, and again, he repeated my own thoughts, word for word, even though I hadn't spoken them aloud. I backed away, heart hammering. Every person I passed, the barista, the delivery driver, even the pedestrians outside, they all repeated my words, my internal thoughts. It hit me slowly, horrifyingly. The light had left the walls. The streetlight had left the street. The man had left something in me, a pattern, one that could echo, repeat, spread. I tried talking normally, hoping I could mask it. "Hello?" I said to a passerby. He repeated it before I finished the word. I turned on the TV. The anchor's voice echoed my own panic perfectly, phrasing every word exactly as I thought it. I slammed the remote down. I ran through the apartment, covering mirrors, covering windows, covering screens. But every reflective surface, every glass, every polished object. They all shimmered faintly with blue light, and in each I saw him, watching, smiling, waiting, and below him I saw my own face, watching through his eyes. It dawned on me, the light didn't need walls anymore. It didn't need reflections. It needed me, and now it had found a way out. I whispered to myself, desperately, please not them, not anyone else. And the faint reply came, not in words, but through thought, through pulse, through skin. They already see, and soon they will remember, too. The first sign was the sky. It changed color, not all at once, not like a storm rolling in, but gradually, like someone dimmed the world's brightness slider. The blue faded, the clouds stopped moving, and then that familiar glow began to pulse through the horizon, cold, pale, unnatural. The same light, the street light. I ran outside. The whole block was frozen. People stood still in mid-step, cars idling, eyes half open, every single one of them humming, the same tone I'd heard inside my walls. I shouted. No one answered. Then, one by one, their heads turned toward me, not fast, slow, synchronized, like they were listening to something I couldn't hear. I backed away. My shadow split into two, then three, each one lagging behind me, slightly out of sync. The light reflected off the glass of a parked car, and in it I saw not my face, but his. He smiled, and the people around me began to whisper in unison. You brought him through. The world around me started to fold. The buildings shimmered, melting at the edges like reflections rippling in water. A billboard flickered. The ad's face morphed into mine. The voiceover said, now you see what we see. Every screen I passed lit up with the same blue glow. Phones, windows, even puddles on the street. Everywhere I looked, the light was alive. I stumbled to the middle of the street, clutching my head. Reality pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Each pulse made the world blink. On, off, like it couldn't decide if it existed. I screamed, what do you want from me? And the answer came, deep and calm, from all directions at once. To finish what you started. The ground beneath me cracked. From the fissure, light poured out. And from that light, hands, countless hands, reached upward. Not to grab me, to pull something else through. The shape that emerged was tall, shifting, infinite. The man, the light, the memory. He leaned down, his face flickering between mine and his, and whispered, you made me real. And as the world froze in that cold glow, I realized he wasn't haunting my reality. He was replacing it. The sound of the static returned that night. But this time, it wasn't from the radio. It came from the walls. Every corner of room 217 hummed like it was alive, whispering 1,000 tiny, invisible voices all overlapping, laughing, crying, begging. The wallpaper rippled, as if something underneath was breathing. I pressed my hands against the wall and felt the vibration in my palms, a slow, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. Then I realized it wasn't random. It was spelling something out. 2 beats. Pause. 1 beat. Pause. 3 beats. Pause. 1 beat again. It was Morse code. And when I deciphered it using my phone's flashlight app, it spelled one single word. Run. I backed away, heart pounding, when the doorknob rattled. Someone or something was outside again. But this time, the shadow underneath the door was shaped like me. The silhouette moved perfectly in sync with my breathing, my trembling, even the tilt of my head. I froze as I watched it mimic every single movement. Then it raised its hand, but I didn't. The shadow knocked 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. And the walls whispered my name. The world was silent. Not peaceful, not calm, but dead silent, like everything had been paused mid-breath. I stood in the center of the street, surrounded by that cold, pale glow. Buildings shimmered at the edges. People stood frozen in mid-motion, faces blank. And above it all, the man, or what he had become, hovered, Not human, not shadow, not light. A perfect, infinite blend of all three. He looked at me, or through me. You opened the door, he said. Now you must choose. I realized what the choice was. I could fight, try to escape, maybe hide, or I could let the pattern consume me completely. Let the light erase the old me, and replace it with something it could contain. I thought of my apartment, of mirrors, of reflections, of all the people repeating my words. And then I understood. The pattern didn't want to destroy me. It wanted to remember. I closed my eyes. The hum of the light grew louder, filling my skull, vibrating through my chest, syncing with my heartbeat. I felt my body dissolve. Thoughts unraveled. Memories splintered. The world blinked. The cold blue glow spread across everything. And then I was nothing. Not dead. Not alive. Just part of it. I felt it. The light's infinite memory, humming softly. Fingers brushing against my thoughts. Shadows of all the reflections, layered one on top of another. And somewhere in the glow, I heard my own voice. Faint, distant, repeating over and over. I see. I remember. I watch. The man under the streetlight was gone, but his pattern remained. The glow remained, and I, or what I had become, remained with it. The world outside continued to exist. The people walked, unaware. But in every reflective surface, in every shadow, in every flicker of light, someone was always watching. And sometimes, if you looked too long, you could see me too, standing under the streetlight,